that I was terribly proud to be part of it, but at some point you actually have to realise you put your money where your mouth is, and so I wrote a story too. In fact, actually I wrote 6. It's called Simultaneous: 6 Tiny Tales of Time and Love, and I hope you enjoy it. Tale number 1. And what was lucky was that they both fell out of love at the exact same time, the exact same moment. And they both had friends who had got divorced, but they hadn't fallen out of love at the same time. And that meant one of the couple had always been left floundering, clutching desperately to the wreckage of a relationship they hadn't the wit to see was damaged beyond repair. It was embarrassing to watch. You know what? It was tedious. But not in this case. Not with him and her. The very same second. They couldn't have planned it better. They looked at each other and they both said in unison, "I don't love you anymore." And then they laughed a little, because it was weird to hear those same desolate blank words echoed straight back at them. They shook hands, they said farewell, and they parted. And both with a slight sense of sad regret, yes, but mostly in relief. And in amusement too, because they'd never been in sync before. Not ever. Not even during the good times. It was funny how, only in breaking up, they were at last perfectly compatible. 2. They both fell out of love, but not at the same time. She fell out of love first. He's noticed that she's stopped calling him Pookie. He never liked being called Pookie. She'd always called him Pookie, he thought, just to annoy him. She'd ruined perfect days with it, suddenly using that stupid name when they'd been having fun. She'd call him at dinner parties when he was about to make an intelligent observation. He'd tell her off, and he'd sulk. She'd laugh, then kiss him on the back of the neck. "Does that feel better?" she'd say. "Better now, my little Pookie bear?" And she'd smooth the humiliation away. But one day, she'd just stopped. He doesn't know precisely when, only that she doesn't do it anymore. The moment passed without announcement. There was no fanfare to the time of his de-pookification. In bed, he lies there in the dark, wide awake as she sleeps still beside him. He racks his brains. Certainly, she hasn't called him Pookie for a couple of weeks, and before that there was the business trip, and before that there'd been that time she'd visited her mother. No, he didn't suppose he could have been her Pookie now for well over a month. He wants to ask her why not. He wants to wake her right now and ask, isn't he her Pookie? What is it he's done? How can he put it right? He'll beg her, please, let me be your Pookie once more. He stops because it seems like the single most pathetic thing a grown man could ask of a woman. He's never realised before that a broken heart was more than just a turn of phrase. Because as he lies there in the dark, he feels the shards of it rattle around inside his chest. It's as if he swallowed glass. 3. So, they fall out of love, and she thinks he falls first. She considers it odd how little romantic gestures have become attacks, accusatory and passive-aggressive. He'll kiss her on the cheek, but no longer on the lips. He takes her hand whilst crossing the road, but will drop it as soon as they reach the curb. He's polite when he was never polite. He'll say he loves her, but it smacks of that same cool politeness. She starts to realise how every small precious act they ever shared, an unforced smile, a brush of arms against the other as they watch TV, the lowering of voices to whispers in the dark, every single one of them he will carry on performing, and they are exactly that. They're a performance. He'll fart in bed and then turn to her with a leer as if to say, "But you never used to mind, and if you mind now, if you dare say you mind, it means we'll have to confront what you're so scared to face. It's over. It's over, and you'll never get this love back. Each and every day, it just gets more tarnished. It's over now, baby." And it's true. She used to love his farts. Once upon a time, his farts were the whole world to her. 4. They broke up, but there was no animosity to it. They decided they would be best friends. He suggested he should move out, but she said there was no hurry. She didn't want him to put him to any inconvenience simply because she didn't love him anymore. He could stop in the spare room, although on second thoughts, she could take the spare room if he preferred, whatever he found nicer. He said the spare room would be fine. They arranged a rota so they could use the kitchen at different times, the bathroom, the lounge. That way they wouldn't have to see each other. It wouldn't be awkward. The first night he put a note under her door. "I know you're hurting," he said, "and I feel so sorry for you, and I promise you things will get better." She put a note under his door. "You're the kindest, sweetest man. I worry about you too." He left a note for her the next day, propped up against the toaster. "I hope I didn't disturb you last night with my crying. I want you to get the best night's sleep you can and be all fresh to tackle the day." She left him a note on the toilet seat. "I was crying too. Don't think I wasn't crying, but I muffled it by putting my head under the pillow." He left her notes every day, telling her how he was doing, little anecdotes that had happened at work. She left him notes, and she talked about how she felt, her happiness that now the weather was improving. It might be nice and sunny at the weekend. And every note was marked with X's, and they would secretly count them on each new note they received to see whether there were more X's or few X's than the day before. "I think you're adorable. I never deserved you," he wrote. "You're my entire world, and even now you've gone, you always will be," she replied. "X, X, 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 X," they both concluded. One day he wrote her, not a note, but a letter, a long letter. He told her this was ridiculous, that he still loved her with all his heart, and he was pretty sure she still loved him. He knew they had their differences, but surely with all that love they shared, they could find a way to put them aside, or if not that, face up to them squarely and make them right. Because now he was alone, there was such an ache within him. He knew she was the only woman for him. There would never be another. He wrote the letter, put more X's at the bottom than ever before, left it for her to find, and went out to work. When at last he came home, he found an old suitcase waiting in the hallway. All of its stuff had been packed in there, higgledy-piggledy, a single white sleeve lolled uselessly out of the side. There was no letter, just a simple note, and it told him to get out. 5. Because the problem with time is, it makes sentimental idiots of us all. The things we cherish, the design of dinner plates we ate off when we were children, the type of car our father used to drive, fragments of pop songs we never liked or listened to or even sang along to. "Oh, I remember this," you say. "Turn it up, turn it up." Who could have guessed that all the banalities of the years long past would one day become so precious? That all this time we were surrounded on all sides by triggers that would make us happy. Just getting up in the morning should have overloaded our senses with nostalgia. It's a wonder we didn't explode. They're still married, and it's been so long since they fell out of love with each other that they've started to sentimentalise that too. "I was happy back then," she thinks, "those first years when I loathed him." He says to himself, "Nothing has ever been so good as the days I first realised everything was bad." She fell out of love with him on a summer holiday on the Dorset coast, and it had rained every single day, and each time it rained, he sulked as if it was somehow her fault, and in one glorious moment, something inside her head had just snapped. Now she remembers that rain as light and refreshing. Wasn't rain so much cleaner back in the old days? He fell out of love with her in a local restaurant halfway through his chicken Alfredo. He suddenly knew as a pure and obvious fact that his wife was never going to understand anything he said to her. She was never going to understand him or any of his needs or any of his failed ambitions and how much those failures hurt. And hadn't she got fat? And hadn't she got dull? He liked that restaurant. He thought back on how the chicken Alfredo had tasted. It had burst with flavour and melted on his tongue. Each year he says to her, "Where shall we go on holiday this time?" and she always wants the Dorset coast. Each wedding anniversary, he takes her out to dinner, and it's the same restaurant. They sit in the same booth. He orders the chicken Alfredo. And for a while, at least, that stale antipathy they feel for each other gets a bit of spark to it. They still despise each other, but it's a beautiful thing. Or at least a comforting thing. Or at least it's theirs. It's theirs and only theirs. They've earned it. And they'll go to bed and make something like love and hold each other all night long. 6. So what was lucky, what the lucky thing was, here's how they were lucky. They both fell out of love with each other at the exact same time. And the moment of that love dying was so undramatic, so bloody casual, neither of them even noticed. Their love had withered away into something so very small that when it finally disappeared, it didn't leave on either heart even the slightest pockmark. They carried on in this loveless state until one of them died. Him, maybe, or her, it doesn't matter which. And it was only at the funeral when the one left alive realised that he or she really didn't care. There was this coffin in front, and people dressed in black all around, and some of them were even crying, and everything was supposed to be so sad. But to the remaining spouse, it wasn't clear what impact this death was supposed to make. No tears, no grief, and in a way that was rather a good thing. And in a way, it was desperately awful. He, or she, would sit at home, lost and lonely, and yet not so lonely, and that was the hardest part. She, or he, would feel the rhythm of the day pass over, and it was strange how little that rhythm had been interrupted. And the survivor might go to the photo album and pick out the wedding pictures and stare at them, him in his best suit, her in the white dress, and remember that time when in front of the whole world they had made their vows to love each other forever. I do, he had said. I do, she had said back. Not in sync, not quite simultaneous, but so nearly, really, so very nearly. Thank you very much. And now